Hello and welcome to The Fix. This is the very first broadcast we've put together as part of these series of training videos. So bear with us if we have any issues with recording or anything like that. I also have two children and some builders in my house, so who knows what's going to happen. This is the first of a two-part series of videos which we're putting together largely to do three things. So we want to introduce ourselves to you. Rather than doing a big blurb about our backgrounds and what we've done in the world of copy, we'd rather that kind of came through our organic conversations. We're going to introduce the fix, the concept of the fix, and how it can potentially and hopefully help you become a better writer, sharpen your writing up, tell a better story about your business, whatever that might be. And in these two videos, we're also going to share 10 ways of becoming a better writer. So I'm going to do 5. And Glenn is going to do 5. Now, we haven't actually spoken to each other about which 5 things we're going to talk about. So there's a very, very small chance that we're going to say the same things. But I think that's fairly unlikely, knowing Glenn as I do. So Glenn, welcome to the first show of The Fix.
Hello.
Let's dive straight in, shall we? So we've set ourselves a fairly open brief here. 5 ways each of helping people become a better writer. Obviously, what we're going to be doing most of the time is looking at people's work, looking at work that we've written or people have sent in, and we'll cover that at the end, and trying to help people improve it. But to begin with, we're going to pontificate a little bit. So give me your first tip for becoming a better writer.
So I've realized, I mean, a preamble and pontification.
That's you, isn't it? That is
yeah, I mean, that's on my gravestone already. I've already made it. But yeah, I mean, I've realized as I've got older, I'm now classifying myself as an old man. Compared to you, Nick, I've got a few years, so that's less surreal. But yes, as I've got older in this game, I've realized that my advice has become increasingly dull and like just boring and vague, which I'm very aware of nowadays. So I always prefigure everything with that disclaimer, because, and you'll probably see as we go through these tips, if we have got them the same, then your advice is equally dull, and we should just stop this immediately. But in seriousness and in genuine like sincerity, these points of what I've learned over time, and all of the advice that we'll do through this entire project, this whole fixed thing, is that I can only ever tell you what I've learned and what I've done, and I know it's the same for you, Nick. So anyway, cut to the chase. My first tip for good writing has nothing to do with writing, and it has all to do with reading, and it's the idea that you should read more, but also read beyond the world of copy. I find that one of the biggest mistakes that most people make is that they spend all of the time reading countless copywriting books, various marketing books and what have you, which is cool. I'm not saying you shouldn't do that, but if you only source your ideas and your intelligence from there, then you're going to end up in a real bad place, because ultimately, as we will learn over time doing this, and as you'll probably already figured out yourself, good copywriting is all about ideas. So the more ideas you can get from a more varied place, the better. The disadvantage with copywriting books and marketing stuff, my own included, is that they are very kind of technical and looking at actual copy, whereas actually to figure out ideas and stuff, you need to be reading widely. So long story short, just read more, and we read more widely, but that's like, oh yeah, okay, I will do, but how do I, if I'm working all the time as a writer, as a copywriter, you spend a lot of time doing that. What I would say, and I realize people don't do this, is that you have to make time for reading in your schedule. You have to see it as part of the work, which a lot of people don't. They kind of do the work all day, then they read in the evening, or they read in spare time. I will now kind of, don't get me wrong, I'm in a luxurious position because I'm successful and what have you, but even so, you need to try and encourage the mindset in whatever, whether you're a freelance or whether you work in an office environment, even if it's just an hour a day, just set some time for reading, because the benefits will come back to you. That's number one.
That's absolutely, I would, similar to one of the points I was going to make, but also on the register, you know, the actual language that you use. If you only read one form of writing, sales material, that is when people start to fall into the trap of you sound like a used car salesman, or it sounds oily, or whatever the criticism of that work is. You know, nobody actually writes or speaks like that naturally. It's not a normal register to adopt. But if you only read marketing material, you run the risk of just adopting that way of talking, and over time it becomes more and more and more unnatural. Which is why reading and watching other people, whether you can, if you don't like reading or you struggle to fit it into your day, you can always listen to an audio book or whatever, because you pick up on a different sort of rhythm. It's the same type of thing.
Yeah, in fact, on that, I'll double down on what you're saying there, because yes, reading is like you learn the ways that sentences are structured and what have you, and how narrative works and stuff like that. But yeah, like watch stuff, like watch series on Netflix, listen to the radio, like read a magazine. It doesn't necessarily need to be like Tolstoy that you're reading. It can be any form of input, but do make time for that. You can learn as much about storytelling from watching like a Disney Marvel film or something than you can from like Seth Godin's latest like random spiel that he's just shat out kind of thing. But like just read widely and put as much information and, dare I say, culture into your head, because that's where your ideas will come from.
Right, number two.
So one of the other bit, so I've realized that my main advice comes down to read more. And then the second bit is like, don't write. And it's like intuitively, like counterintuitive, but just the biggest mistake, I wrote on this recently, is that I find that a lot of people go around and say, oh, when you're stuck and when you don't know quite what you're doing, just write, just get something down on the page and what have you. And to some extent, in some situations, like there is no absolutes in this game, but that is a massive mistake in most cases. If you don't know what you're writing, you're going to just write a load of rubbish, or by chance you might write something good. But more likely is you're going to spend ages going back and forth trying to figure it out, start sweating, doing all this weird stuff because you haven't done the necessary prep. So again, it's a really boring like piece of advice, but and I found that basically the biggest piece of advice universally is just have discipline and follow the kind of dull tips you do get, but don't write until you know what you're going to write. And so I spend as much time now planning, researching, even for like the smallest thing. So like 1,000-word like small blog post or like a little post for someone, I will spend like at least half the time reading around and figuring it out. I will basically bullet point most things. Certainly a longer sales letter, you will bullet out the kind of narrative of it. But even a small piece, say 1,200 words, you can divide that into like 4 blocks of 300 and just figure out stuff so that you know where you're going. Make some quick notes and figure out, again, don't want to be repetitive, that's an interesting word, but repetitive, but it's all about the idea. So if you've not figured out the idea before you start writing, you're just going to be kind of wandering in this weird kind of like just wandering around the idea, and no one's going to follow you. The reader's not going to give you the time. They don't know the exploration that you're doing on the page. So you need to plan. And again, I'm just so aware that it's such a kind of old man teacher kind of thing, and it's like, oh yeah, okay, whatever. But in reality, and then you go, oh no, but in reality, I've got like a deadline. I've got to do it by 3 o'clock and submit it. So you think, oh, I haven't got time to read around it and plan it. I've just got to get it out there. Again, I would argue if you did like some kind of weird scientific split test over it, the person who just got up at 9 o'clock and wrote would, versus a person who for the first 2 hours reads about it, understands it, plans it out, and then writes for the next bit, will have a better piece than the person who just like throws themselves running into it. So my second tip, you're reading, you're spending all your time reading, and then when you want to write, don't, like, you've got to plan, you've got to figure out what the idea is before you start reading.
Actually, remember, that's one of the first pieces of advice you ever gave me. It was delivered rather witheringly. So I was a junior copywriter when at one of the Agora businesses in London a long time ago, and Glenn was already working at the business and was already head of copy, or in a senior position. So we would you'd have your work reviewed by senior writers. And I remember once printing something off, bringing it over to you, and you didn't even give any feedback on it. You just said, you write too much. Why don't you think about it a little bit more? But I remember falling into that trap, because when you're a junior writer or you're just starting out, actually all you have to do all day is write. You don't have anything else to do. You don't have meetings to go to. Nobody really cares what you think about anything, because you're still learning. And therefore you write all day, and you write really poor copy all day. But actually over time, if you figure out that at least 50% and arguably more of your job is thinking, if you start to see yourself as a thinker who figures stuff out and then writes it down, then you're sort of starting to get into the writing. There's technical challenges and, you know, linguistic elements, which are all challenges too. But if you figured it out already, that's a big part of it, isn't it?
It's massive, yeah. It just gives you that head start. And there is like a thing where I believe there's a certain, like, magic is a stupid word, but like a certain authenticity and a certain energy comes from writing when you have to go at the page. So like it's a side tip, like 2B is like, when you are then ready, when you've planned what you're doing, the fact that you're then like desperate to get it down, and you sat there tapping away and getting those ideas down with a clear direction, rather than tapping desperately fearing for your job. When you're actually sat there going, oh no, I want to get this down, I know where I'm going, I'm doing that, there's a natural energy and natural vibe that will come through that and be more readable for the reader anyway. So
you can feel it, I find. At that point, you've got to change yourself to the desk. Anyway, we're getting diffuse. Let's talk about your third point, which is presumably another thing about not writing.
Well, actually, yeah, no, technically it's not about writing. No, it is writing. So this is a weird one, and it comes down to personal taste, this. So this is like those first two, like, I'm afraid that's just facts. Like, it's not really tips or advice. It's just, you have to do that. If you don't do that, you will not succeed. This one is like a bit more personal, and it's because I discovered before I became a copywriter, I studied creative writing and stuff, and I discovered a writer called Paul Auster, who most people have heard of, American bloke. He's not as fashionable as he used to be, but he spoke about his writing process. And I always remember this, it stuck with me, but then I realised it was reflected in my creative process generally, was that he used to, or he still does, he'll handwrite a paragraph out. So he's sat there writing a novel. He'll write a paragraph on the page, then he'll take that paragraph and go to the computer, edit it onto the computer so it's there, then read that paragraph again and go on to the next paragraph. So each time he's taking it from the top, and he's got a self-edit within it. Now this is particularly helpful, I find, with long copy, but it's the same with any piece really. But it's the idea that every time you get stuck or you come to a natural end of in your flow of copy, I would encourage you to try and read it from the beginning every time before you go on. Now it's a bit of a slow and it's a laborious process, but it reminds me of, I used to play music and write songs with like my friends in the band, and you have that line where you say take you from the top, and you go and you play the riff, and then that goes into the chorus, and then you're like, right, where does it go from here? And you're like, oh, I'm not sure, maybe we could go to this note or do this or what have you. You go, well, let's just take it from the beginning and see where it naturally flows. So you get this natural flow in the music, and I think that happens the same in the writing. If you've got that flow, if you've got that narrative, you've got to remember that a reader, especially in the world where we're working in sales, where we've got like seconds to like keep people, like everything is against us. There's the world happening around that person who's sat there reading your copy. They don't want to read it necessarily. They've got other things. So any kind of little fault in that writing is going to get you. So it pays to constantly be going through it, constantly be reminding yourself of, all right, actually, so before you even get to the next bit that you're going to work on, you might notice something in that first bit and change that. And that might even send you somewhere different, or you think, oh, right, I need to deal with that now and flow through there. Again, you've done your planning, so you should roughly be where you're going, but it just helps to constantly kind of go from the top. As I say, it's more of a personal thing, and you can, don't get me wrong, you can kind of, if you want to write the offer at the end of a sales letter, or if you've got how 37 ways to do whatever post, and you want to do number 36 because you know that's like a crack one at the end that you can shove in, you can do that. But again, just at some point, go back from the top and make sure the flow is always there. The importance of being able to flow through a piece of copy is incredible, and you can have the best piece of copy at the end of the pack, or the end of the article, or the end of whatever piece of writing you're doing. If someone's not getting through the top because there's too many problems, it's redundant, so you waste your time. So always take it from the top and try to go through each time. Is my number 3.
And it's certainly true that if you have something that you know is brilliant 80% of the way through, however long it is, almost always just bring that further up. You know,
exactly.
The amount of times I do that, I think, oh, this is getting strong as it goes on. And I think, well, I ought to cut some stuff then, because one, should be strong all the way through, but 2, your best material should come earliest because the largest number of people will see it. Should be right at the beginning if you can. So sure. You should always be in this process of sort of recycling the material higher up, getting your good stuff in early. Right, number 4.
Number 4. So this is, again, not writing. We're back to it. So I tried to do like a chronological thing through writing a piece, but so once you've written it and you've got it all out there, one of the biggest things, and again, it comes back to discipline of being able to do it. And often I like to be as practical as possible when like preaching about copywriting, but like the biggest challenge you'll have to this is business and a boss and a head of copy or a marketing manager or whatever, but you need to learn to try and fight back against this. So this is the idea that you need to leave your copy to rest. So once you've done it, you need to get some distance between you and that piece of writing. No matter how brilliant you think it is, and I'm sure it is, because everything I write is brilliant until I look at it the next day and then I realise how crap it is, let alone getting someone else to look at it. But leave it to rest. So even if you've done like, even if you can only get an hour between it, fine, but just give it some time. And the longer the better. Ideally, as I say, if you can, I've now, because I've got kind of freedom, can kind of move my work around. So I can anticipate that, right, I'm going to write that on Tuesday. I'm not going to look at it again until Wednesday. And I've built that into my project that I'm doing. But even if you're in a tight spot and you need to like get something done by the end of the day, leave that piece of copy and do something else. Now, this again can get very philosophical, and I'm sure on video 100 will be just kind of sat there with white beards and figuring this kind of stuff out. But I would encourage you to do something completely different. So don't go on to another project or go on to anything to do with writing, if possible. And this is the case if you're leaving it for like an hour or so, do something completely different, like wash up, or like if that's the best thing, or like make a cup of tea, watch your program, do something that isn't engaging those faculties of like critical thinking and analysis that you would be using, and rest and get that there, get away from it, and then come back to it. I guarantee you will get it, like see it with fresh eyes. Again, when it comes to like arguing the case for like adding some time and doing something else, I would
just lie. I would say lie to the person that wants it. Just say it's not written yet.
Well, yeah, but or justify it and try and change their thinking and show them that like you'll see that if you just immediately edit it, you'll miss a load of things. So kind of, I guarantee you will find more if you leave some time from it. So leave stuff to rest and try and do something else would be my 4th tip in the chronology of writing a very quick piece of copy.
So let's go for number 5 right off the bat.
Number 5.
With his enormous goblet of, I assume that's just juice.
IKEA. No, it's just watered down blood. We are still not writing, which is a key facet.
Mine are all about writing, don't worry.
Experience. Well, to be fair, I did think if I go this route, they're less likely to cross over. But number 5 is a classic one. You'll know, Nick, from the time we've worked together. But you've got to read your copy aloud. If you, it's just the single best like editing function and editing tool you can do. Ideally, if you can get someone else to read it aloud and listen to it so you can take notes, do that. But otherwise, if you're doing it yourself, you've got to be disciplined. When you start stuttering, when you start like missing a bit, when you start getting bored, and there will be times you get bored, you need to mark that and edit it. I realistically, I don't read everything aloud now, but I would say about 70% I read aloud. And the best reminder of this, in my spare time, I've been working on a novel, and I knew to myself, I promised myself I would read it all aloud, but I had edited this thing to within an inch of its life. I really thought I'd like captured every like little line thingy, and being a writer and getting the physical view of the words on the page. I read it out, and it was like, I thought I probably should stop writing, because like how many mistakes and crap is in here, how many sentences that don't flow when you enunciate them. And you might say, well, people aren't reading my copy aloud, why would I bother reading the sales letter aloud and editing that way? But the fact is, if you can read it aloud, it will just flow better on the page for someone else. It's just that way that people read on the page. I know you know this watching this, and you probably understand and can see the logic of it, but it really is the most effective way. So try, once you've had that little rest, when you come back to it and you've got that piece, I try to print it out. I know it's not ideal in this ecological age of climate crisis and everything. I'm still quite naughty, although I've started printing 2 pages to 1, which is slightly better. I did do 4 pages to 1, and now I'm wearing glasses because I broke my eyes from the tiny text. But no, like I'd print it out and read it aloud. As I say, if you can get someone else to read it, if you're working in a situation where the voice, if you're ghostwriting for an editor or what have you, which obviously in most copywriting situations we are, then if you can get an editor to read it out and capture some of their natural voice, ace. But otherwise, do it yourself. Be disciplined. When you get stutter, when you want to rephrase something, do it, and look out for when you naturally stop wanting to read, because it will happen. And your gut feeling will be going, oh, I'm tired, I'm what have you, I'm thinking. But all of those reasons that you justify yourself as to why you stopping to read, the reader's going to have all of those same things. They're going to get bored at that point too. So you need to be disciplined and change it and figure it out. The best way to do that probably is going to be bring some stuff up and delete stuff, which, I mean, there's so many tips we can give, but yeah, that's the big one. So read it aloud.
Hardest thing actually to do, I've always found, because all new writers are given that advice, and almost none of them ever do it. But yeah, it's horrible to hear your own words being read out, because especially by somebody else, which I would argue is always the best way. But ultimately, the things that you don't want to do are the things that you have to force yourself to do, particularly in the age where, you know, we're often writing for video now, that somebody else is going to have to perform and read off an auto cue. Now, having done that role, presented plenty of material written by other writers, I can tell you, the person doing the presenting will thank you for having read it out yourself prior to recording, or forcing them to rehearse it with you. It's always the worst. Even now, I cringe hearing my own words being read out aloud by somebody else when I'm going through an edit or something. But it's by that I mean a video edit, you know, watching it back.
Sure.
Always the best, the hardest and the best.
Yeah, it's one of those things you don't want to do it. As you say, you don't want to do it because, like, well, I'm certainly inherently lazy as a writer, so I don't want to do all that stuff. It's writing. There's like something about the writing, the tactile nature of it, that it's on the words on the page, like it's in your head and all this kind of stuff. So you don't want to read it out, this thing. And then, as you point out, Nick, like you don't. It is awkward when you read that stuff out, when you hear your stuff being said, and it's. it's something that you probably don't anticipate doing. Like you kind of write your copy and then it's gone, or you see it there as a visual thing. If you're working in the kind of in the indirect world or whatever, if you're doing long sales letters, it's there on the page. You don't see it. It's all silent. But you've got to go through it, because it's just the best way of like getting those little things. And it might only be little things, but I always compare it to a driving test, especially going through a long piece of copy. There might not be a massive problem with it, but if you get 3 or 4 little faults every time, it's just saying to the reader, you can't really be bothered to go through this. I've got, oh, that stopped me, that stopped me, that stopped me. Every time you're stopping them, there's enough stuff going on around them to stop them. So don't add to that. And reading aloud will help you do that.
Completely agree. Right, let's wrap this part 1 up there. I'm just going to kind of sign off with a little bit of admin. Now, more often than not, the fix is not going to be us talking about our own processes, although we will weave some of that stuff in. It's going to be us talking about your copy. Now, whether that's a challenge you're facing, a piece of copy you send in and want us to review, you know, there's any number of ways of submitting work. And to be honest, this is a fairly new endeavor, and we don't know exactly how everyone's going to want to write in with copy that they want fixing or reviewing or, you know, commenting on. But if you do, and it is the lifeblood of this project, write to us at feedback@longcopymasterclass.com. Now, that's in all of the emails that you received from us when you signed up. Do write in. You know, we're here to try and show, not tell. We want to show you how to improve your copy. I also know that, you know, 9 times out of 10, seeing somebody else's copy being improved or tweaked or fixed up or commented on is a good way of unlocking ideas of your own. So do write into us. Don't be shy. We're not here to take people's copy down. We're here to be constructive and honest. We will be honest, but we won't be rude. We won't be mean. And we're here to try and improve your work. That is our whole mission in the fix. So feedback@longcopymasterclass.com. We'll sign off there, and we'll come back in part 2, where I'm going to talk about some tips that don't involve not writing and do involve writing. So let's sign off there. Thank you very much, Glenn, and we'll see you in part number 2. Goodbye.